Now that we know why are there emotions and how can it work, we can separate logical thinking and emotional thinking. Logical thinking is a process when you try to think through what logical connections are in your emotional thinking, so it is basically a checking process for your thoughts. Emotional thinking is the other name for the intuitive thinking. It is fast and takes only a small effort to do. Logical thinking is slow and takes a lot of effort. This uses your emotional thinking as well in the process, so you have to build up one for that topic to work. Usually, every task can be done only with your intuition, but sometimes the task can be too complicated. When you have to use your logical thinking to solve the problem, not a lot of people like to use this skill. For example, you hear the leaf rustling outside and you close the windows. Why did you do that? You didn't think that through, that it means wind, and if it is windy, you have to close the windows. You will just have a feeling to close the windows. So it was an intuitive thought. But when someone asks, why did you close the window? You will say it is windy using logical thinking. For another example, how this works, that you try to learn a new instrument, for example, violin. At first, you have some intuition about how your hands work, but you have to use logical thinking to know how much force you should use for a louder sound and what angle should you play it. But later on, this will become intuition. So when you see the notes on the sheet music, that you will kind of automatically play the note in the right amount of force, you won't even think about it logically anymore. It is easy to see why is it important to use emotional control. When something triggers your intuition, you can feel a big spike of emotions. During this time, your intuition will be broken. What I mean by that your intuition will send you signals with different emotions, but if an emotion is too strong, you can't really process anything else. If you are angry, you should not drive or do anything. That is the reason that when that happens, you become clumsy. This is also the reason that autistic people have a harder time to control their emotions. They get the same signals to their brain and create different emotions like everybody else, but they have a harder time silencing noise. And then they will get a higher signal of emotions, therefore they can sooner reach a limit where some emotions can overwhelm them. And that can cause an outburst. But this is also why some people are more weather sensitive. If you can't cancel the effects of the weather change, like pressure and heat transfer, or less or more light, then your body will feel that its base signal changed and will send you a lot of emotions. This will ruin your intuition because when the baseline changes, it is harder to determine how high the emotional spike is. Everyone will feel the weather change, but it will be harder for some. The weird thing is, if you have a bigger pain signal short term, you can control it, you can use it to shift your focus. It will help to reduce the noise coming from the world. That's maybe a counter argument against this theory, but it is a cool trick. If you really want to focus, that's the reason maybe unknowingly pulled out some of your eyebrows when you were stressed. The pain is the easiest form of this, but this can be any stimulation. Maybe want to massage your forehead or your ears. This is what autistic individuals do, and it is called steaming. That's the reason why some manipulation techniques work so great. You give someone a spike of emotions, good or bad, and you weaken their intuition so you can exploit their desires, fears, or anger. Okay, manipulation. Should you use it and why is it good? There are two types of manipulation, mass manipulation and individual one. For mass manipulation, you can use emotions like fear. For example, you can use migration. A lot of people will connect to that idea that you state that migration is the problem. A lot of people will have some kind of trauma connected to migration. Then you can use that intuitive thinking to vote for you. If someone has no intuitive thoughts about this topic, then you can create these. With music and aggressive pictures, then it will work too. For this to work, you have to know the trends in the population. For individual manipulation, you can't really afford to use statistics for your manipulation technique. Because if you mess it up, then the consequences can be dire. So, for an individual manipulation, you have to know your target. You can manipulate friend or spouse, so you will know that what errors are in their intuition. For example, if you want your boyfriend at home for dinner, then you can use that other girl in your speech to manipulate your boyfriend thinking that you think that he is unfaithful. This will only work if your boyfriend has flaws in their intuition on that topic. If he has no error on that topic in his intuition, then he will see that you are just manipulating him, which can cause you to break apart. That is why manipulation works so well. It is a technique which is used by everyone. It isn't good or bad, but you should use it with caution. So we made the difference between logical thinking and emotional thinking. We talked about why is it important to control your emotions and how does manipulation work.